Hello and welcome. You're watching QTV and you're watching The Week in Review. I'm your host, Ari Darami. And as ever, I have my friend and colleague Mamadou Mbodj to discuss 10 big stories from the week. Mr. Mbodj, as ever, welcome to the program.
Thank you very much, Ari. The pleasure is all mine.
And it's always a pleasure for me also to see Mr. Mbodj here. And on tonight's program, we've got 10 stories, as I've said. We talk about Bilal boarding school. We talk about the return of tourists to the Gambia after the COVID-19 interruption, a groundbreaking cancer treatment lab, and many, many more stories. So let's get cracking, as I always say. First story, fortunately, tragic one. Serious fire at a boarding school, a very well-known boarding school, the Bilal boarding school. Let's have a look at this clip.
According to the school authorities, the fire started around 2 a.m. on Sunday morning in this room. The school proprietor denies that it was due to an electric spark, but has yet to establish how the fire started. There was a fire incident in the school at the same time last year, but luckily no fatalities were registered, although there was damage to property. This year, 5 lives were lost at the scene, while the other died at the hospital. Ali Nyasi's brother lost his 9-year-old child, while the second child, a 7-year-old, is in hospital in a critical condition.
Ani mo jama mi anko suto dimbaye mutabun kono je bare dindi manyin abe torari bakele bi metembo minto bos dimbaye janile ala nyaala ko ta kono kan kata singo kan.
He was with the younger brother and many others trapped in the fire inside the room. The younger brother is really suffering as we speak because he was badly burned on the face, stomach and legs. He is in a critical condition, but unfortunately his elder brother did not survive.
There you heard our colleague Babacar C taking us through what has been quite a tragic scene of Mr. Mbodj, and it's led to all sorts of, I think UNICEF getting involved, Child Protection Alliance getting involved, but too early to make judgments, surely.
Absolutely. I mean, here, of course, first our condolences to the parents.
Indeed.
How very awful, how dreadful, to lose your child.
But
these children in such circumstances.
Well, this is it. I mean, when we're discussing, as we always do, discuss these stories in the office, I said, I went to a boarding school, and your parents hand you over to a boarding school, and they become essentially your parents. They step in for your parents, and so you treat them, and they treat you as their child. So tragic for the parents, and I'm sure also for the authorities of the school. But one of the things that has been brought up, and I've seen it mentioned in the newspapers and on social media, is the fact that we're in October now, but in September of last year, there was another fire at the school. Thankfully, there were no fatalities and no serious injuries then, but it then leads people to wonder, are they being targeted? And as I said, we don't want to speculate too much.
That's true. It's a fair point. As you called it earlier, what they call local parentis. You are in place, as it were, of the parent. So absolutely, this is now the key. What happened? Maybe when it happened in September, perhaps the authorities should have been more thorough. Learn the lessons, and so that it wouldn't happen in the future. There, according to our report, apparently the proprietor sort of denied
that there was electric, because people always jump to
that sort of thing,
which raises another point for me. I don't want to sort of sidetrack you, but every time we've been to a fire, and I went through some of the ones that we've covered in the last 12 months, the majority of them seem to be due to poor electric wiring. And I guess that's why that was put, and the proprietor was quick to say no, it's not, even though the investigation is not ascertained what led to the fire.
This is the key. We are quick to jump to conclusions. Sure. He was also quick to deny. So one generates the other. It is always in these situations to perform a thorough investigation. Sure. What happened? Can we attribute culpability?
Sure.
That also must come into it. Should there be some prosecution for negligence or carelessness and that sort of thing? Sure. Then what are the lessons to learn? then so that we can apply, as it were, to all such institutions so that we can minimize.
Sure.
We all know that we can never take away accidents and stuff like that from human affairs.
Sure.
But what we do is that we do risks assessments,
Sure.
then we know how to minimize.
And that was a point I was going to come to. You know, one doesn't want to keep on comparing the Gambia to countries in the West, but you know, myself and Malik Carr, our MD, we got into a discussion about this, and we were talking, you know, having worked in the United Kingdom for a number of years, the amount of times they do fire drills in all institutions and organizations of this sort. Every boarding school, some of them probably do it every 2 months, some do it every month. And you know, it's shocking that it should take something like this for us to say we need to look at how seriously we take things like the safety of ourselves and our children especially, who depend on us. They think as adults we've got everything taken care of for them. You know, they don't have responsibilities. The responsibility falls on us as parents, and they've handed it over to us, and we are the ones who actually need to make sure that they're safe, surely.
Absolutely, and our experience when you look around the world, and it is important to make these comparisons because it will situate me within a larger context.
Indeed.
I will really see myself. If I'm just insular,
Sure.
I really do not see my position. I cannot measure these things. But what we are beginning to realize is that certain rational measures help.
Yes, indeed.
That's it, yeah? If I do not follow that, keep on bringing all sorts of excuses. We do not have capacity, we do not have resources, we do not have all sorts of things. I'll say granted,
Sure.
but don't be surprised then when you get the wrong outcomes.
This is it.
So this is it. So we must decide, you know what I mean? There must be that awareness sort of raising aspect. But we can do and all of that. But that must be complemented, I feel, with some kind of enforcement regime.
Indeed, indeed.
If I fall short,
Sure.
there are consequences.
Yes.
Yes?
I mean, yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, as I said, I don't want to keep comparing countries, but you know, fire inspectors go routinely to buildings and institutions, and sometimes they can tell you to shut down until you put certain measures in place. We certainly don't have that here, but we need to.
We don't. And even where we investigate and perhaps somebody is culpable, somehow we tend to favor more of a kind of consensual decision making. So lots of things would be whitewashed and people, sort of the elders, whoever, people in authority, will just talk it out. You know, we know how to talk it out and stuff. There's no consequences.
Sure.
So you have these conflicting things, whereas notions of justice demand that the person who is guilty or who was reckless or careless, all of these things matter. You face the consequences, so people see.
Yeah.
So then you realize then that we keep on repeating the same mistakes.
Sure.
Because we haven't put in the structures for us to say enough is enough. It's not going to happen again. We keep on repeating the same mistakes.
I think that's a point to end on. Enough is really what we should be saying. And I can imagine most of us, all of us, will probably be having a very, very keen eye on the investigation to see what they come up with. I don't think this is one that's going to be swept under the carpet. But thank you for that, Mr. Mboj. And once again, condolences to the parents, the relatives of these young children. I didn't want to give the number that have died because the number just keeps going up, unfortunately. So I've deliberately not mentioned how many have died up to this point. But again, thank you. And now on to something completely different. Highly significant, the OMVG project. We've all come to know these, the Gambia River Basin project. It's going to link various countries, and it could be a life changer. I laughed with my colleagues in the office. I said, I heard myself use the phrase game changer so much that I'm going to stop using it. But just please allow me on this occasion. This could be a game changer. What am I talking about? Have a look.
Yeah, it's a very important project given the fact that we all know how the member states are struggling with power crisis. In the Gambia, we know, in Senegal, in Guinea, it's a problem everywhere. But when we come together, we hope that by coming together, definitely it will be able to, because the dams, are there. We have about 3 dams under the project, and with their supply, definitely we hope that will bring stability in terms of our power supply. So that's the significant part of it. That will also bring more development for our countries and our people.
There you heard it said, there are various things that, can't happen without development. Education is one of them. I think electricity is another. And yet African countries have struggled with this since independence. It's no longer a joke. But Mr. Mboj, I asked the viewers to be forgiving if I say game changer, but this could be a game changer, surely.
You're absolutely correct, and it's been going on for ages. When we were younger, the Gambia River Basin Project,
as it was called.
That's absolutely, right. I mean, what, more than 40 years? I didn't know, and stuff like that. Yeah. Yes, absolutely. What, 1,677 kilometers of connection, the two Guineas, Gambia and Senegal. Absolutely, when they realized that it had this generating power, and it should. We understand that it's not going to affect the whole of the Gambia, but I think Western region,
right, Western region.
Yeah, absolutely, and Lower River, North Bank, the Kiangs, Newmis, and all of this.
Many of them will benefit. Yeah.
Absolutely, and I was even reading all the time that it will also add to a kind of rice production. You have this side, not simply giving us electricity, but again, it will change agricultural practice, as it were, then even have dividend for our agriculture and stuff. Absolutely.
Yeah.
The technology, the infrastructure is there.
And I said again to my colleagues, I said, once we get it, if it works in the way that we expect it to, then for a lot of the things where we've used excuses, we won't have those excuses anymore. We will have to deliver, because for many things we've said, we didn't have the electricity to do this and that. I mean, some of it is quite important, including hospitals, having to use generators and so on. Potentially this could take over. Of course, the people who won't be happy are the people who sell generators, but everyone else, I think, must welcome this.
Absolutely. Whenever you have new technology, people with the old technology will suffer. Sure. This is why development is so disruptive in many ways.
Yeah, thankfully.
Thankfully. So somebody said to me, would prices then come down? So access, price, said, well, I'm not sure. We have to go and talk to them, and at least we have to see it when it begins, how it pans out.
Exactly.
So this is people, they're excited.
Yeah.
I get that excitement, because even people who do not know, when I tell them about it, because we've been getting excited about it, but still, there's still a lingering vestige of cynicism.
Yes, unfortunately.
Well, how people are like, they're really not.
And it's interesting you said that, because some of the people I spoke to were saying, is it going to work?
Is it going to work?
It's like, as you rightly said, this has been going on for decades. So, to get to the stage where we've got two presidents visiting, from Guinea-Bissau and from Senegal, at the inauguration, of course, President Barrow will be there as well. It's no small thing. And, I said, they don't come here just for a party. They come because they really believe that this switching on is something highly significant and possibly life-changing.
Absolutely. So. But there you've mentioned sort of my fear. All these presidents come in politics. What happens if we fall out, for instance, we fall out with Guinea, or we fall out with Senegal in the future, politically, what's going to happen? Because I know somebody who's been sort of involved in this. It was one time actually permanent secretary, Minister of Energy.
Right.
So he said there was actually a point when one of the Guineas was saying, this dam, that's ours. So that is my fear. What would politics do to it?
That's an interesting point, because you've got the Grand Renaissance Dam in Ethiopia, which has actually brought Ethiopia, Sudan, and Egypt close to war. I mean, really close to war, not just kind of a war of words, but actually going to battle. So it can happen, and of course when it was being built, everybody was talking about it, and in fact a lot of people thought it would never be built, but it's almost finished now. And in fact I think it's finished now, and Ethiopia are going ahead, and again conflict. So it's a valid point.
This is really what my fear is. Can we have the kind of political maturity where the body regulating it, in charge of it, would be reasonably autonomous, reasonably independent, and the various parties, all these countries, can we be so mature that we wouldn't interfere with that sort of thing, with their operations?
That's an interesting thing, because
I do not know.
Because as you say, politically, for a president to get a lion's share of it, or for it to make a big significance in his country, that's something that he can take to another election, you know, and say, you know, look at the change I've brought in my country. So potentially, politically, it could be quite an interesting thing. Yeah.
Because for all of them, it will be in their interest,
of course,
for this to work.
to claim that this happened under my watch.
So can we have the maturity where our politicking elsewhere wouldn't interfere with the integrity, as it were, of this project? Then we will all benefit. But that takes political maturity.
Political maturity is what we need. We wait and see whether we have it. Time will tell. Thank you, Mr. Mboj. Now, something else that people were getting equally excited about. We did wonder, would we ever see tourists return? It is, after all, the tourist season. End of October, getting towards November. Guess what? They've started arriving. Have a look.
Recently, there were reports from the Ministry of Tourism that the UK government has allowed its citizens to fly through the Gambia for tourism, news that was received with a lot of joy, not only by tourists looking forward to coming, but also by hoteliers whose livelihood depends on tourism. The arrival of the Titan flight from the UK is a welcome sign, not only that tourism is back, but it is also one we all hope will be first of many.
You heard the voice there of Mr. Smiling Coast himself, Ibrahim Abalde, reporting for QTV, veteran journalist, as we call him in the office. Really, he was excited. I know he was there to greet the first flight. Ourselves and other countries close by, we heavily dependent on tourism. And what's good about it is you'd had British tourists dying, sorry to use the phrase, to get out and go on holiday, and us dying to receive them. And so there's been this convergence. Brilliant, surely.
Well, it matters a lot. I think nearly half of our tourists, I think, come from Britain.
From Britain.
The last time I checked was 43% or something like that.
That's
and,
right.
And absolutely, I live in the TDA, the Tourism Development Area, so I know some of these hoteliers and restaurateurs, and everybody is so worried. We've seen so many of these hospitality establishments so closed down, and in fact, the other
and I know people who work in the industry.
Who work in there. So, of course, we are all anxious about.
So you were saying the other day, I interrupted you. You were talking about we've seen so many of them closed down, and you were about to say the other day. I don't know whether another one bit the dust or something.
Absolutely, was thinking about it. Had actually decided, but there was some discussion, and the person said, "Okay, I will try and just open one more time."
Oh wow!
So stuff like that.
So,
so we sort of try to give them heart, if you know what I mean, because it's in our interest. So my argument is, yes, we'll probably not get the numbers that they had in 2019 and 2018, stuff like that. But my suspicion is that it will be better than 2020.
Yes, indeed. Yes. I mean, because in fact, one of the officials who appeared in that talked about increased numbers, and I joked with Balde. I said, "What do you mean increased numbers? There were virtually no numbers." So it has to be
very low threshold.
They were very low.
So it's very easy for this year.
This is it.
Slightly.
But I think what is in our favour, the Gambia, is the fact that people have felt this being, cooped up. And they wanted to break away. First of all, they had to stay in their homes. A colleague of mine, in fact a cousin as well, hadn't been to work in his office for almost 2 years, I think 20 months, he said, and they were asked to go back. And he said it just felt strange. And so, he'd been working from home all that time. I mean, virtually every civil servant in London has actually been working from home for most of the time since, COVID hit. And now those people, obviously, not only could they not get out of their houses, they couldn't get out of the country. And now they all want to get on holiday. One of them just sent me, literally 10 minutes before we came here, a whole bunch of them are going to Las Palmas for a holiday. So the Gambia is going to benefit from that, surely.
Big time. People were not meant to be cooped up.
Yeah.
It's just in a natural way, it's our nature, as it were. That's why people say that the history of mankind is the history of migration.
Indeed.
We like to move, we like to travel. So I was quite surprised reading the papers in England and seeing that actually a lot of people want to come out, they want to travel, they want to go away. Because we were worried that would it change people's habits? I
have to be honest, I was one of these ones who thought, it's going to change people's habits, because the whole thing about not being in proximity to people, you get on a plane, you're sitting next to X number of people, Some might be wearing masks, some might not, you know, all of that I thought would stop people traveling, but it doesn't seem to have been the case.
You cannot really predict people. That's really what the basic message is. You know, that would always be the unforeseeables.
Sure.
Unintended consequences. There are all sorts of things. That is why the social sciences, some people say, they're not really sciences. You cannot predict people. That is really what the issue is. We can see certain patterns, yes, granted, but that will even depend on the conditions.
Well,
given these conditions,
yes,
we should expect certain patterns to emerge.
Yes.
Often the flaw is in the conditions.
Yeah, well, that's right. And I think the perfect one to end on is the fact that we've mentioned it many times, the fact that remittances were meant to go down during COVID because a lot of the people who were sending remittances lost their jobs in the West, and yet remittances went up and went through the roof. So you cannot predict people.
And
but
even before
yes,
COVID-19,
yeah.
Oh, everybody was worried for Africa.
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
Everybody.
Quite.
Everything you read.
Yeah, quite.
What happened?
Yeah. Not the disaster that was predicted. Thank
Even
you,
though
Mr.
perhaps
Mboj.
shouldn't speak too early.
Yes,
granted.
Yes. Britain is
you
about
just
to
never
go.
know.
Britain's about to go into a fourth wave, so let's not get carried away. But thank you for that. Now on to something else. I belong to a cancer charity. I'm a trustee of a cancer charity, and it has made me acutely aware, Mr. Mboj, of how poor cancer treatment is in most African countries, and particularly so in our West African sub-region. Well, guess what? Something is happening that might be about to help change and turn that around. Have a look at this clip.
The acquisition of the machines is just one step towards acquiring our goals. These machines are very expensive, but they need constant supply of consumables so that we can sustain the services. We want to work with the government to be able to run this lab sustainably and uninterrupted for as long as possible. We have calculated that to run the services, we need just over $1 million every year to buy the reagents to be able to run these services continuously.
There you heard Dr. Jah, who of course presents a program on QTV, and again he's talking about the amount of money that's needed, and the reason we need it here is because when you look into the sort of rates of cancer and treatment, there's a bit at the beginning of that when he talked about people dying undignified deaths. My own mother died, but she died in the UK. As did a cousin of mine, and it was their deaths that kind of got me involved deeper into cancer treatment in Sierra Leone. They both died in the UK, but in Sierra Leone, and it made me look, and I saw the statistics for Sierra Leone, I saw the statistics for the Gambia. So Mboj, what we just heard from Dr. Jah, this is really what is needed. It's the start, as he said, it's one step, it's the first step. What we need is for this to ramp up. I mean, he talks about all sorts of people who could help, government, GSM companies. Interestingly, he said who might help, and that this needs to turn around, surely.
Absolutely. Then he said that the consumables,
sure,
that got me really quite scared. There's so much, the $1 million say, every year, and it's so needed here. I saw one statistics telling me that about 184 are diagnosed every year in this country. Sure. 132 of them die. It's a high death rate. Absolutely. And knowledge of it over here, the deficiencies in our medical knowledge about most of these things, so delayed diagnosis and all of that. Absolutely. So this is one pillar.
Sure. One
plank.
Yeah.
Sort of multi-planked, if you like, solution to
and believe me, I'll say it here, I will be offering my services because, what we've gone through in Sierra Leone for the last 15 years that our charity has been in existence in Sierra Leone, they don't need to go through. We can tell them some of the problems they will encounter and some of the things, but the equipment that we've talked about, we never had it in this country. People have always had to go abroad, go to Senegal, further afield, Turkey and other places, but now we have this, but we need more of it.
Absolutely. I mean, for us, let's be honest, since the change of government, as it were, 2016, 2017 coming up, we've been saying, especially medically, it seems that there's been a lot of movement, there's been a lot of additions and improvements, as it were, all over the place.
Sure.
Fantastic. There's a little movement there. But here, this high end, as it were, of medical service, that's one thing. But I mean, the low end, creating the basic stuff for everybody. I've been heard, sort of a school of thought, as it were, as part of our development strategy, to have this sort of basic provision strategy. Take care of all the basic stuff, as it were, and then the high end, the top end will come. So we need to have that balance. And then how do we keep this high-end stuff sustainable, as it were, and then for it to be accessible, everybody to have access to it?
I was hoping you wouldn't mention the sustainable word, but you did. But that's always a problem.
That's the problem.
And you know, but thanks for that. So you know, I think it's something that we have to keep in mind. On to our fifth story. Again, this Q Group Foundation just launched a series of scholarships for folks wanting to go to UTG, but not just any old scholarship. Have a look.
The students that we've been helping over the past few years, we have realized that most of them, when you ask them what they're studying, they mainly say accounting or development studies. Being a technology-based company, we've been very concerned about that. And we know that, you know, technology continues to shape the way we do things in this world. So it's very important that we have a critical mass of our students in sciences and technology, what they call STEM. So that's why we came up with this partnership with MOPSI to encourage students from the high school level to study in these fields.
I think I said to Ja there, nailing it really, Mr. Mboj. Almost the kind of words that I have expressed every time I've gone to the convocation at the UTG. I think the last time I went, there were 59 accountants and 119 people who'd been who were awarded law degrees. And I said, where are the STEM? Where are the engineers and so on? So this is a step. Again, Dr. Jai in the other story talked about a step, but this is quite a significant step because, you know, when you look at what they will be getting, these students, full scholarship, and this is really what is needed. As she said, we're moving in a technological age. We really need to move towards that as you know, what our children go and qualify in.
Yeah, absolutely, and she was actually a brilliant STEM student
at
high school. We went to high school, looked together, brilliant in the sciences and stuff. And the husband met engineering, so I'm not surprised there. Absolutely, but it's so. I remember at QIT when I was Quantum Institute of Technology. So with the students, we introduced what we call career development, career counseling. We were talking to them about stuff like that. Most people, I come into the class and ask them, what do you want to be? What profession do you want? What career? Accounting, accounting, law, communications, media. So we were searching for where are these STEM people? And this is what we need. So we must target. Fantastic idea. We must have lots of groups. What government can do is what government can do.
Indeed,
Others, what we can do, that's what we must do. We must target STEM students, pump money into it so much. And the other part as well, to make countries sort of conducive for people to live.
Yes, indeed.
I don't want to target you. You go get your brilliant degree and then you leave because you want more money over there. We want them to stay. So the incentive to be educated in STEM, that's one thing. The incentive to remain and work here, that's another work we need to do.
A very, very significant element there, Mr. Mboj. Thank you for that. So we're very much in favor of STEM. And really, it's what we need for the development of the nation. So that takes us on to a quick break. And after the break, we'll have 5 more stories. So don't go away. Join us after the break.
Looking for the fastest and easiest way to receive money transfers from abroad? Well, QMoney and RIA just made it happen. Now you can receive international money transfer from RIA directly into your QMoney account with no additional cost. Once you receive an SMS alert about your transfer, walk into any QMoney agent across the country to receive your payment for free or use the money immediately to buy credit, QPower and other QMoney services. It's fast, safe and convenient. For more info, call customer care on 133. QMoney, Sinu Calpe. Terms and conditions apply.
out the all-new Tigo 8 at S-Pass Motors. Call 3522-222 or 353-2222 for more information.
Cherry.
Hello and welcome back. You're watching QTV and you're watching the Week in Review. And for any viewer who's just tuned in, you have missed 5 stories, but don't worry, we have 5 more to go to the end of the program. And here, co-hosting with me is my colleague, Mr. Mahmoud Mboj. Mr. Mboj, thank you for your interjections so far.
My pleasure.
And now on to our next story, the 6th story, the Queen'S Baton. This is all to do with the Commonwealth Games, which will take place in Edinburgh next year. Have a look.
Deputy Mayor then handed over the baton to the Governor of West Coast Region the following day, who also embarked on a similar activity, escorting the baton to Brikama, with students and athletes having the opportunity to run with the baton along the highway. On arrival at the Governor's office in Brikama, he was full of praise for the organizers and described himself as lucky to be among the few to run with the baton twice.
Running with the baton is a good blessing, I can say. Only a few could do that, not everybody. So we have the opportunity to run with the baton. That's history, and this is also in the history books. I ran this thing some years ago when I was here as governor initially. And this is my second time of running with the baton. I think I'm more opportune than anybody in the Gambia having this opportunity twice, you see, in a row. History revealed that some time ago, Gambia went out of the Commonwealth family. But thanks to this present government, through Adam Barrow, that was able to register us back again into this family in 2017.
Let me correct myself before we delve into this story. I said I led into that saying it was Edinburgh. I was actually thinking of COP26, which is taking place in Edinburgh in 10 days or so time. The Commonwealth Games would actually take place in Birmingham, West Midlands in England. Mr. Mboj, the Brits went around the world collecting territories to the extent now there are 54 states in the Commonwealth of Nations and 18 territories. So 72 places is where this baton will go, and it's just come through the Gambia. Now, the Commonwealth, it's about the Games obviously, but it leads one, as it did again in the office, to a wider discussion about the Commonwealth. Yahya Jammeh had taken us out of it and we're back in it. Should we be in it?
I remember the staff the other day, they were laughing at this phrase, the Queen's Baton. I mean, they just simply couldn't get that.
Even up to yesterday, I was still explaining it to somebody.
They couldn't get that.
Sure.
When it was started in 1958.
That's right.
Sort of goes round. The Queen would give it to Saturday at Buckingham Palace. The Queen would give it to the first relay runner. And the last one would hand it back. On the day, as it were, the opening ceremony. Yes, I have no problem with stuff like that. It's sports.
Sure. Yeah.
This is our colonial heritage.
Very much, yeah.
We're still living the consequences. I mean, this is us.
You and I speaking English.
Absolutely, exactly. We are not having this review in Wolof and or Mende, stuff like that. So this is us. Yeah. There is a certain importance, if you like, to disconnect. I like this term now. This is Sankara's term, as it were, but in significant areas, in real stuff. You know, when we're dealing with our economy, when we're dealing with certain things, we need to disconnect. But with stuff like that, because on the other hand, we need to connect with the world.
Indeed, yes.
So you have this balancing act to do. Where do we connect?
Sure.
Where do I focus on what I need to do within?
Yes, yes.
So this is some harmless fun.
Well, indeed, it's great fun, and I always used to look forward to it because whereas we always struggled to win medals at the Olympic Games, many times some of our smaller countries would win medals in the Commonwealth Games. So I look forward to it. And I did throw a quiz out to a couple of my reporters the other day. I said, show me worldly wise you are. I said, can you name 2 countries that were never part of the British Empire that are now members of the Commonwealth? They couldn't get it. Mozambique and Rwanda.
Yeah, one would have thought that with the Rwanda bid, because it was in the news all the time. And earlier on when you said we'll be had in Edinburgh, I think the first time we won a medal in the Commonwealth was in Scotland. Was it Edinburgh, Glasgow? I can't quite remember.
Sure.
But Sherfai in the high jump, he got bronze.
Wow.
So when he said Edinburgh, I said yes.
Yes, indeed. So I think many of our athletes will be looking forward to the Commonwealth Games, as will we, and hopefully we'll be able to bring you some really, really good coverage of that. But yes, as Mr. Mboy said, it's a bit of fun and great fun, we hope. Now something again that is close to my heart. We talk about our diaspora and how connected or disconnected they feel to their countries. Now for the Gambia, we dropped in passing about remittances, which is one way in which people keep connected. But something else is happening. Recently, a diaspora portal and website have been launched to keep that interconnectivity even stronger. Have a look.
The launch of the new diaspora website and portal is part of a wider project called Supporting Local and Economic Development in the Gambia, funded by the government of Italy through the Italian Agency for Development Cooperation. The project, which is implemented by the International Organization for Migration in coordination with the Minister of Foreign Affairs, aims to promote local economic development, diaspora involvement and engagements in countries of origin, youth empowerment and creation of employment opportunities for youth as ways of mitigating irregular migration. It is reported that over 200,000 Gambians currently live in the diaspora. And as such, VI is now a Directorate of Diaspora and Migration at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs to promote, support and facilitate consultative engagement of the Gambian diaspora in national development.
The reason I'm smiling and I particularly like this story, and you can quote me on this, I heard the bit there about the Directorate of Diaspora. Well, in 2007, when Ernest Koroma first became president, I put up a proposal for there to be an office of the diaspora, and guess what? It was accepted and it was launched. I wasn't made head of it, but that's another story. But it was about connecting the diaspora to the home country in a meaningful way. Generally, Mr. Mboj, is this a good thing, what we've just heard about?
Oh, absolutely. Now, I was talking to one of the consultants, as it were. I'm a Jeng in Sweden on diaspora matters and the like. So this is absolutely important. We know how much impact the diaspora makes in our societies, the remittances and all sorts of things, and even politically as well, through sponsorships of one political party or another and all the rest of it. But again, we also have an impact. What we do in this country has got an impact on what is happening outside, how they live outside. So it will depend on how the government wants to do it. Yes. If they, because normally with these things, because the diaspora reflects us in the sense that you don't have a common platform.
No.
It is as fragmented as we are.
We have 18 political parties.
Absolutely.
The diaspora is representative of that sort of lack of, it's not a one-party state.
No.
And they're very, very different opinions.
That's it.
Yes.
How can the government sort of transcend, maybe this will be the challenge, a sort of narrow political interests to create something that would be truly national, in the sense that whether I support NPP, UDP, whatever party I support, I trust this unit, this organization, this structure, so that we can tap into that and see how we know how much they're doing, but they can do much more. It's not simply about remittances, technology transfer. There are all sorts of ways in which we can use them, but it just depends how we handle it politically. When we are so fragmented and divided in here, then we wouldn't really benefit.
I'm glad you said not just about remittances. If anybody wants to look up, just type my name online. You'll see an article I wrote for Huffington Post called More Than Just an ATM. And it was talking about the diaspora, that the people back home should not just see us as people who send money, give money to them. we are people who are also concerned about development in our home country, and we want to contribute to that in a meaningful way, and it needs to be in a structured way. Me sending money to my aunts, uncles, or my parents is good, but it's not saying send certain amount of money and say you must start a business with this. You must, that kind of thing. That's what's going to make a difference.
That's absolutely so. And with me, also, I've said it here before, I really want them to come and flood this country.
Yes.
In terms of changing attitudes to work, because as we know how work goes in the West.
Yes.
With us, we are sort of so embedded in certain social norms that, to my mind, are quite counterproductive. If I want to have a more formalistic, structured, checks and balances kind of organization, so that I can see policies and inputs give me the right outputs. That is why we call it corruption. But they've long told us about the hybrid state. We have these formal structures, but we have what they call this neo-patrimonialism, as it were. So this attitudinal stuff, we all know that this has been sort of a dragging factor.
Very much.
Yeah, so I'm like, I want my place to be flooded by my diasporas, the right ones, that critical mass.
Absolutely.
I am not going to be corrupted.
Absolutely right.
I'm here for the greater good.
Yeah,
you know, that sort of attitude.
I think that's what we need. That is definitely what we need. So bring back your skills, bring back your know-how. We talk about brain drain. Let's talk about brain gain. Come back, offer your services, volunteer. As happens in Sierra Leone. Nurses there every year for the last 15 years. During the summer holidays, they go back to Sierra Leone to work in the hospitals and the clinics where they got their training, free of charge. They pay their own fares even to come. That's the kind of thing we need. So thank you for that. And I look forward to delving into that diaspora portal and website. Stenboj, thanks.
Cheers.
A completely different story now. We've heard of lots of markets being rebuilt, restructured, and so on. So I thought, let's have a look at a recent one. Bacau market, been refurbished and given quite a good do-over. Have a look.
It was one of the busiest markets when I was joined in the KMC as a collector. But it ended up being the worst, or it went to the level that it was completely dead, because the maintenance that were required to be done in this market was not taking place for the past 2 decades. So, but today, alhamdulillah, with the coming of the new administration, the market has been entirely renovated. All the 4 sets, because it is 3 sets that is being renovated, and a newly constructed one, including 11 kiosks that have been constructed. But definitely it's a move in the right direction, because the hard fact is the dues that are being paid by the vendors should be returned to them.
I confess here, it's quite naughty of me. I chose that particular clip because he mentioned the M word, maintenance. And Mr. Stenboj, when I sent out the reporter to do this, I said to her, if I'm here in a year's time and you are here in a year's time, I want you to go to that market and see whether they have maintained it. He talked about the last market failing and collapsing and because of lack of maintenance. This is a huge problem, is it not?
Absolutely. You said no maintenance for over 2 decades.
2 decades.
Absolutely. How many times have we talked about this all the time? But for Bacau, remember, we ran a story here before where they had cleaned their areas. So it was quite impressive compared to the other markets that we had been covering, as it were, seeing what is dirty. And this is the key. Right now, he mentioned with the new dispensation, the new government and stuff like that. But really, I'm going to say this again, we must stop relying on government. If we do that, it is never going to work. Let's just realize that. So the committee, the market development or market management, as it were, committee, they must have their procedures, their processes in place. We must be able to run ourselves.
I'm glad you said that, because again, these people get angry at me. Coastal Road Market, where I live. I said time and time again, I want the people working and selling there to get angry about the filthy state of that market, to do something. Why are you waiting for government? You are the ones who live, work, earn your living there, and people stop going there because it's so filthy. Why are you waiting for government to come and clean it yourselves? Get together, and this is what we need. And honestly, I meant it when I said to the reporter, I will send you there in a year's time if I'm here and you're here, and I want you to go and come back and tell me, have they maintained it? Because we seem so poor at doing exactly that.
It's still the dependency. We are still with the colonial state. Still dependent on this, the gaffer, the buana, to come and give us things. Sometimes we discussed this. It was Angela Merkel and Chimamanda. When Merkel made the point, which I liked, he said, really for democracy to work, it takes more than government. One truly understood what she was saying, I have to say. Yeah. We must step up. We are government. So there must be this attitude where at least my turf, my patch, as it were, of this wider canvas, I take care of it as much as we can. We try to rule ourselves as a community. We have specific local problems. Can we chip in a bit and start running it? Once you have that commitment, that's the only time I think that things can be sustainable.
I think sustainable. That's a key word there. And as I said, Mr. Mboj, I think that's really, really valid point, because is it going to be sustainable? And then I think for the people who run it, it's not government, it's the people who live and work and earn their living there. They need to make it sustainable. Don't say, oh, we'll let it run down again and government will come and rescue us again. That's not what is needed, not just in this market, but in so many other sectors, really.
So many other sectors. And I'm sure when you said that for decades, maintenance, I'm sure the authorities were collecting dues.
Well, that's it. And
there's no denying that.
There's another bit where he mentioned about the dues that were being collected but weren't being plowed back into the market. Where was it going?
So this is it. We have certain habits. If they do not go away, nothing is going to happen. It's so easy to be sort of scapegoating government, but go to any public agency, any public government, from the top to the bottom. This is how we live. You want a service? Man, you better give me under the table. You want a service? You better pay for it under the table. Everybody complains about this.
And it just goes on. When we start acting and stop paying, it'll stop. But until then, it'll carry on. Thank you, Mr. Mboj. So back our market, we wish you well, but we'll be coming back in a year's time. Mark my words. Something completely different now, sport. A very popular sport, but one that has been under-resourced, let's put it that way. What am I talking about this time? Have a look.
Nowadays, it's not only a traditional sport, it's a way of living and a way of earning. By looking at the wrestling fraternity, nowadays, you have so many wrestlers who are benefiting from wrestling.
Aliu Jiba, Councillor for Summit Award, also a youth representative, described wrestling as a sport in which one can earn a living. He added that lack of support has affected the growth of the sports.
It's become a bit of a cliche now to talk about how big wrestling is in our neighbours' yard in Senegal. The 2 or 3 times I went there, I was lucky enough, there were some huge wrestling bouts that were being televised, and there were crowds there that football teams would envy in their top division. But it's also a traditional sport here. But really, in spite of all the similarities we always talk about between ourselves and our brothers in Senegal, we've not really put the kind of infrastructure that they've got there. I mean, the arenas there are really impressive. Now it looks as if we're about to start doing that.
Yes, kind of. When I was younger, back in the 80s, it was reasonably popular.
Right.
I remember this figure, sort of like, now we'll call him iconic in wrestling, Jalang, was it Jalang?
Yeah.
It was reasonably popular. So in Serekunda weekends or whenever there was a wrestling match, people will talk about it, and people will go and watch. Yeah. Not quite the same scale, of course. Senegal, that's a completely different level. It's so embedded in what they do, and they've had over the years that cultural continuity and the like. But in our report, we just said that they do not get support. This is, following on from our previous story. Support from whom?
Yes.
If you think that it was the government of Senegal that made that sports big, no, that is not true.
It's private.
That's it. Governments, to my mind, just ought to be more facilitative. I know that in the basic services, health, education, government must be key in these areas, but there's so much else, as it were. The citizens will come up, and tell government, look, pass the right laws. I want the enabling, when we talk about enabling environment, that is what I want.
What we
pass the right laws so that we could do A, B, C, and D so that things will grow. Whenever I just appeal to government, I want this, I want that, it is not going to happen.
It's not going to happen. So, hey, I'm sure Wagan, who presents a show on GTV, will be thrilled at this possible development. But, one of them talked there about people could in future make a living from it. And that would be great, really, because you go to Senegal, it's almost like the sumo schools you have in Japan, where there are these schools where people come through the ranks and rise through the ranks. And they're heroes there. And kind of really worshipped almost. So let's hope the sport develops.
That's it. So the people who are running it, you must come up with ways. It is not simply enough to tell us we don't have support, we don't have this, we don't have that. Granted, how do you mobilize support?
Indeed, yes.
That should be part of your job description. I'm just tired of hearing we don't have this, we don't have that, we don't have that. So this is where your imagination would be tested.
Earn our support.
Absolutely.
Reach out.
Yes, that's how it should be.
Sure.
So when things are going well, you're not managing.
Sure.
Do you know when you're managing? When you don't have this, I don't have that, things are going bad. That's where a good manager really distinguishes himself.
Sure.
Not when things are going well. You've got all the resources.
So
that's not management, man.
So we're throwing it to you folks in the wrestling associations.
How do you do it?
Find a way to do it. Thank you for that, Mr. Mboj. Brings us on to our last story, and it could not be more different. This week has marked 10 years since the murder in public view of Muammar Gaddafi of Libya. Have a look.
A decade of war has left a legacy of destruction on a massive scale, leaving an estimated more than 800,000 people in need of humanitarian assistance, according to the United Nations, which highlights protection, access to critical services like healthcare and education, as well as basic household goods and commodities, including food, as being things that are absent in the country. Those who longed for Gaddafi's removal point to his brutal suppression of opposition, including the execution of protesting university students. However, looking at what the country has become since his removal, the question must be asked, was it worth it?
Was it worth it? Mr. Mboj and I are smiling because we had quite a discussion in the office. As I belonged to several social media platforms and WhatsApp groups, I was being inundated with everybody telling me what a wonderful man Muammar Gaddafi was, and they were talking as if somebody had killed Father Christmas when he was murdered, for all the wonderful things he did. Mr. Mboj, how did the Gaddafi legacy become so distorted that seems to be the narrative, certainly in Africa, about him?
Yes, I think it's a bit like my enemy's enemy is my friend. His anti-Western rhetoric.
Sure. He wanted to be president of Africa.
Yes.
So people see him as a Pan-Africanist.
Yes.
Yeah.
So we, of course, I don't need to go into that. We've got this beef with the West, haven't we? All sorts of things. Okay. So anybody who sort of embodies this rhetoric, as it were, we think, oh, you are a savior, you are a hero. We sort of turn the heroize, you become something else. But truly, Gaddafi is a difficult one.
He's a complex one.
It's a very, very complex one.
Sure.
So the question, choice question, was it worth it? I'm like, I feel a bit like that the Chinese intellectual, was it in the 70s, was asked, well, what do you think of the French Revolution, the consequences? He said, it's a bit too early. After how many centuries? Stuff like that. So with Gaddafi as well, I'm not sure. Gaddafi was very helpful to the ANC.
Sure.
There was a time that they wanted Mandela,
the
West wanted Mandela to condemn Gaddafi. Mandela wouldn't do it. So Gaddafi was also helpful to so many liberation movements around. So I do not want to go for either I am for or against.
Yes.
One must have a subtler, more nuanced.
Which is what we wanted in that story, I have to say, because I had to say to the reporter, you need to mention things like that 7th of April every year they executed opponents of Gaddafi publicly. They were hanged publicly. It started with students who had been protesting and saying they wanted greater freedoms and they wanted democracy. He had them hanged publicly, and he had their corpses hanging for a week from lampposts in the streets. I said, why don't you mention that? I said, it didn't happen once. It happened every year for about 10 years. I said, these are things that you need. But because people talk about just the things that we're talking about, government shouldn't provide everything. They talked about new couples getting a new house, getting this, getting that. And that has become the narrative. So we've only got about 45 seconds to go. On that note, Mr. Wood, just Gaddafi in summary before we close.
Absolutely. I wouldn't go for I wouldn't demonize him.
Correct.
But again, the hagiography wouldn't be there either. None of it.
I think there needs to be balance.
Yes. Even in Gambia here, our 1981 aborted coup. Gaddafi was implicated in it and that sort of thing.
That's right.
So this is going to be a difficult one. He did terrible stuff, but again, he did stuff that, other people had appreciated, and he had made an impact in what they were doing.
Another country is destroyed.
Look at it.
Sure.
The people who wanted to export democracy to bring it into that place, look at it. It's possibly worse than when he was there. So how far? Where are we heading?
Sure.
I don't think anybody really knows where we're heading.
So we'll leave it to the viewers to answer Mr. Choi's question there. Was it worth it? On that note, Mr. Mboch, thank you for your interjection so far.
Thank you, Ade, for inviting me.
And hopefully, viewers, you've also enjoyed the program. And until the next time, that's all for now. Goodbye.